rival charger came out, we all pretty much said it was the P90 of Nerf. And it is. It is the closest thing we've ever gotten next to maybe the rival Zeus that resembles that kind of function, with a magazine that's kind of up here at the top, except for it's not removable. This one's internal, but the same kind of form factor. Here's a rival charger, and here is a P90. You can see the thing there, but this isn't really all that close because it doesn't work in quite the same way, and it's using rival, which is kind of like cheating nowadays, because rival rounds will pretty much fit and feed in whatever orientation you could possibly want. So, a good try, a really good blaster in my opinion, a pain to mod, by the way. I never did a video on this one, but that doesn't matter anymore, because now we have this. Meet the Bulwark from Jack Rabbit Nerfer. The Bulwark is a completely 3D printed blaster with the files publicly available for purchase on Etsy and will run you about $26, $27 US at the time of this recording. But why exactly should you care for yet another fully 3D printed Nerf blaster, a flywheeler that uses either single or dual stage cages, so if you really want to, this thing can hit up to like 180, 190 FPS? It's the magazine location and the reloading system and the feeding system in general. This thing feeds magazines in horizontally, not down here. They go in up there. Now I should note that this thing, the manual of arms for this, generally you should be able to just put a magazine in like that and it should feed in there. And I actually have had that work in the past, but I've had to take this thing apart so many times and replace so many pieces and repair so many pieces. I guess at some point that stopped working on mine, but it's still perfectly serviceable and it is a joy to use. And that's this thing's entire claim to fame. And we will talk about how practical that is later on in the video, but yes, this is completely 3D printed. That means you will have to purchase the files and print out and build the blaster yourself, because at the time of this recording, nobody's actually selling these completely finished yet, and I have no idea how much that would cost. What I can tell you is it uses probably about a roll of filament, maybe about 700 grams of filament. I split it between two printers, my Ender 3 and my CR10, and it took about 6 days of non-stop work to get all of this done. So if you're using a single printer, it could take you a little bit longer, but I did use a 0.16mm layer height at about 20% infill. And I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out, considering my printers weren't working at all when the files actually dropped. I spent a long time trying to get them working. And that does mean it's printed out of PLA. I used a carbon fiber filament and then a silky purple filament because I really liked the look of this. And this does mean you probably don't want to leave it in your car or any place that could exceed like 160, 170 degrees Fahrenheit, because you're going to get some warp, you're going to get some problems, so take care of these blasters. But since it is 3D printed, if something breaks on it, I can just print out another one and replace it pretty much endlessly. That might not work for you if you didn't build it yourself, but that's one of the pros of having a 3D printer, and my god, if I can do it, you certainly can. In fact, I will have a link to the Creality ENDER 3 on Amazon down in the link below. It might be a little bit hard to get them right now, but if you're looking to get a 3D printer that works and will print out this entire thing no problem, that's my option for you. It's very good for how much money you spend. It may take a little bit of tinkering every once in a while, but it's definitely worth it, and there's a huge community of users, and there's a lot of documentation on how to get those things absolutely printing flawlessly. And because of its configuration, it's not a very big blaster. In fact, the entire blaster, from tail to nose, is roughly the size of a regulator with no attachments or anything on it. Of course, this has a stock built into it, and there's no magazine jutting out anywhere because it's perfectly situated on the top of the blaster. It's also incredibly thin because it uses those smaller flywheels, which gives it a lovely profile that is really hard to ignore. Now, when I originally built my Bulwark, I was using 4 Fang ReVamp motors overvolted on a 3S LiPo. And that was hitting, when I cronied it, anywhere from 172 to 185. Unfortunately, I blew a pair of motors because one of the rollers in there, we'll get to that, broke, and, well, it jammed in my flywheels and completely screwed my entire blaster up. So now I'm using Krakens and then Fang ReVamps, which gives me a comfortable anywhere from 145 to 160. Which means this blaster is no slouch, and honestly, if you don't want one from me just standing here holding this thing, if this doesn't sing to you, I don't know what's wrong with you, because just look, you should have already posted in the comment section, how can I get one, before you even watch the video, because this thing is so freaking cool. I don't know who originally posted this, but I did remember seeing a concept that somebody 3D printed out of a horizontal feeding magazine system that I don't think ever went anywhere, and Jack Rabbit Nerfer took the exact idea, modified it, put some rollers in there, and made it work. The entire way this blaster works is there's actually a little tiny pinwheel in here that hooks the dart and rotates it from a vertical position to a horizontal position and shoves it into the flywheels. And that is absolutely amazing. To make it feed reliably, however, he needed to use little rollers. So there's actually 7 little wheels in here that are 3D printed that freely spin that help guide the dart in no matter where it happens to be. And the system works really well. I've had to tweak it a lot. I've had to print out rollers multiple times and sand them and try to get them spinning as smoothly as possible because they are just 3D printed pieces of plastic. But when it works really good. It is full auto, there's no kind of select fire or anything on this, and I should point out it is full auto, and it's in a pretty compact package. Which means getting single shots off with this thing is a little more difficult than normal, but getting a comfortable 2-shot burst off, mwah, oh, it's good. It's really good, and the rate of fire is on this motor, which is the one that Out of Dart sells. You can also find them on Amazon. You can also find faster RPM motors, which haven't been tested, but I'm sure they could do some pretty interesting stuff. Oh, this is the perfect rate of fire for me. In fact, I would like a 400 RPM if I could get it. I'd like a little bit lower rate of fire, but if you could imagine having this thing just stuffed somewhere in a jacket, and then, just like with a P90, little compact SMG, look, I seriously love this blaster. I can't even begin. Building the Bulwark is kind of a pain. The instructions are there. There is a wiring diagram, and honestly, wiring diagrams, while I did follow it, I had a crash course in learning how to read a wiring diagram, and it worked, because he used different colors. I really appreciate that. He at least made that simple enough that even I could understand it. Here's a walkthrough video-wise of how the wiring goes. So unfortunately, I killed a pair of Fang ReVamps. The entire blaster was powered by 4 Fang ReVamps, and unfortunately that is no longer the case, because not only am I out of Fang ReVamps, I want to try something different. I even partially melted the top of these wheels here. They may technically still be okay, but just to be on the safe side, I have another pair thanks to my friend Greg. So I'm going to put Krakens in the back of this blaster. So the front wheels will be Fang ReVamps, the back wheels will be Kraken, and hopefully that is okay, and maybe it's even better. Who knows at this point? But that also gives me a chance to talk about the wiring in this blaster. So I have taken everything apart here so you can kind of see what's going on. It's a really tight fit. I had to use some pretty small wire that I normally wouldn't use. This is like the size I would normally use. There's no way in heck that's going to fit through there. So power is going to come from the battery. Positive is going to go to the common on the red trigger. Then the normally open on the red trigger is going to go to the normally open on the firing trigger. And it's also going to go to the flywheels. So you can see this red wire here is actually that one right there. So when I press that open, because the common gives power to both terminals, they'll normally open, because the switch is normally open. When I press that, it's closed. The flywheels start to spin. All groovy. And then on the firing trigger, we've got, of course, the normally closed going to the common on a micro switch that is up here. This micro switch up here is actually part of this cam mechanism, and what that does is make sure that when you pull the trigger, it completes a full cycle, a full rotation, and fires a dart without anything getting trapped inside of here and screwing you over. That's the entire point of that. And mine might be a little bit finicky, because obviously I had a jam that blew everything up. So maybe I have this bent in a weird way, it's not working quite the right way. I'm not entirely sure. Hopefully I can figure that out. Then we've got the normally open on the firing trigger going also
to the normally closed on the cam mechanism. That is this green wire that you see right there. That's not right, is it? No, it is right. Amazing. And then the common from the firing trigger is going to the positive, or, you know, whatever version that makes it rotate clockwise. And then the normally open from this micro switch is going to the firing trigger's negative. So that kind of completes our whole negative circuit right there. And then, of course, the motors get stitched together, and all of those negatives connect right there and flow back to the negative on the battery. So it's basically a rapid strike is what I was told. I don't know how to wire a rapid strike, but I guess now I do, ironically enough. I've never used 3 triggers in a rapid strike, but obviously it's a pretty good idea. My little support right here that usually has a spring in this broke off, but I actually found out that it's working a little bit better without that, so that's me. I'm going to get these things all situated and wired up, so hopefully this thing will work again and I can finish this video, because I'm really upset that these things originally broke. So as a little bit of a cheat, you can see I just bridged these 2 connectors like there, and you can see the positive right here, that has a little tail that comes off that actually connects to the wire right there. So the front of the red wire is going to connect right here for that positive, and then this back positive has a little bit of a lead right there. And same thing for the negative, and that just hooks into the negative right there. You can see there's like a cut in the wire, and that helped very much, especially when I could just go like that and the entire circle is complete. And hopefully that's about the minimum amount of wire that my brain can quite figure out. In fact, I'm just going to reuse this wire. Why the heck not? By the way, if you've never bought one of these, oh my god, this soldering iron, the TS80, I believe it is the best thing that's ever happened to me. If you are a complete idiot at soldering, this thing is so good it will fix pretty much everything for you.
So in this exact configuration, I need 2 sets of wheels, 4 motors, and 3 switches, some wire, an XT60 connector. That's all the extra hardware you would need to print this thing. There's also a brass insert that you could use to melt and keep your battery door screw on there. I actually had one. Apparently they are the same brass inserts that Worker uses for all their bolt sleds, so I had a lot of them. You just put the thing on there, push a soldering iron on top of that, heats up the brass, melts in the plastic, and it's good to go. You also need a couple of springs, obviously, because not only do you have one for the magazine release, but the little lever that pushes up the mag as well. And while I don't think they're necessary, there are springs for the trigger and the rev trigger. Other than that, nothing. It's awesome how simple this thing is. And because it's taken me so long to get this blaster working to the point where I wanted to do a video on it, I have seen people say you don't even need the micro switch up here for the pusher. It's basically there to make sure that the pusher never just does like a half rotation and jams up your blaster. People say it works fine. I've ran rapid strikes without that. In the past, you usually use 3 switches for a rapid strike. However, to have a more controllable rate of fire, it's probably good that you use it. And honestly, I got mine working just fine. And again, if I can do it, any of you can do it. But there is something to be said for a blaster like this, because here's an FDL3, a semi-auto version. The full auto would be slightly longer, but meant for the same exact darts in the same kind of magazines. Right now, unfortunately, the Bulwark only takes Talon mags, so keep that in mind when making your purchase. Some of the 3D printed derivatives may work as well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's meant for Talon mags. Katana mags do not currently fit. But you can kind of see, while this thing has a stock and everything built into it, if I were to add a stock to the FDL, it'd probably be about the same length. If this thing is comfortable to shoulder, it's more comfortable for me to kind of brace it like this. I think this works flawlessly, and I'd love to dual wield them, and that may be a thing that happens in the future. Is it really that much different? Is it really worth using this kind of system over your typical mag release system? For one, I can obviously just press in the mag release and drop mags out of my FDL, which tactically could be very important, because when I'm firing and I need to reload, I can just do that. And that's a wee bit faster. With the Bulwark, I'm supposed to be able to do something like that and shake it out, and you can see I constantly have problems with that. If I just push in the mag release, that works fine. And I'm also supposed to be able to just put the mag in and click it down, but you can see it's not quite working for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Something may be broken or out of place again. It did work at one point. And that's not bad, but that's definitely a little bit slower and weirder than doing it like in the FDL. But it should be said that I don't have a big long honking magazine sticking down to here that I could accidentally knee while going into a sliding position during a competitive match and absolutely shattering the ever-living crap out of my FDL. Oh. Rip Naptown's FDL. I watched it happen. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. So, is it more practical? Some ways, yes. I don't have to worry about anything like that happening. It's all in one little thing. Honestly, while the reload isn't that much slower, it technically would be a little bit slower, although you could probably practice this and get really good with it. But I think just the overall shape of it, there's one thing that, like, the Griffin does that I really like. The Griffin, even though it uses the bigger flywheels, and I really wish there was the small wheel, those are just better in every way. Every blaster that's a flywheeler that isn't brushless should just be using the worker miniature wheels that they use for the Hurricane. This thing's, the muzzle is down here, and this up here is basically where I would see it. Like, it's pointable enough. There's enough barrel there that I can kind of just align that with my target and fire, but there's no optic, and even if you were to put an optic, your barrel's down here. The Griffin is pretty much completely in line because the flywheels are horizontal and they're pretty much with the top rail, so that thing is incredibly accurate and intuitive to shoot. This is a little bit less. It's also a full auto blaster, so it's not meant for any kind of crazy good accuracy or anything like that. Anyway, it is a flywheeler, so it's going to be inherently a little less accurate than a Springer, but it works, and that's like my only complaint. I don't know how it would be fixed. I would just like to have this chunk a little bit smaller with a rail on it. But really, there's not a whole lot of fat to trim on this thing. It is pretty brilliantly designed. Jack Rabbit Nerfer has outdone himself when it comes to this thing. Like, even the battery box, whatever battery you want to use in here, it just has to not be very long. It can be incredibly thick, but not very long, and it will fit in here. Now, I don't have a battery, really, that wouldn't fit in here flawlessly. Anything I'd say from, like, 800 to 1500 milliamp hours should fit in there. And, of course, depending on what battery you use, that kind of dictates what motors you're going to use and what performance you're going to get. But it's great. It is well worth the frustrations of building one, putting it together, and honestly, like, this is kind of the flywheeler that is gonna be really hard for me to ever gravitate from. I'm kind of glad my prints weren't flawless on this one, because if anything breaks, I could just reprint it. If I ever just snap the thing in half, I can just reprint an entire another one in about a week. And it's so cool. Like, really, that's what the entire thing boils down to. It performs well, it's comfortable, the grip is perfect for my hands. Might not be perfect for yours, but I have a pretty average build. Arms are a little bit shorter, hands are a little bit smaller, but I'd say average. It's comfy. I really like it. Somebody's already made a P90 style grip for the thing. You can get that very, very close with this. But honestly, this thing just slaps. The Bulwark is definitely worth your time, and hopefully all of you get a chance to use one of these someday, and I can't wait to see what future this blaster holds, because there could be all sorts of little changes coming, as with all 3D printed blasters. By the time I put up this video, there's already a new version out, and it's way better. That hasn't happened yet, fortunately, but it's probably going to happen at some point. But it's worth your time. It is definitely an amazingly cool blaster. Entirely 3D printed, little bit of soldering. Part-wise, honestly, not that expensive, all things considered, for a full auto blaster that is very, very unique in the way it feeds and fires. Let me know what you think about Jack Rabbit Nerfer's Bulwark down in the comments section below. I'm really interested to get your feedback on this one, and if you think this is more or less practical than some other options that you could have. I'm on the fence about that one, but I love it nonetheless. I'm Walcom 7. Thank you very much for watching this video, and of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different one. I would shill my Patreon and stuff right now, but videos have been kind of slow, huh? I'll fix it. I have a lot coming, don't you worry, and I very much appreciate those of you who support me on Patreon. I can't thank you all enough.